Welcome back to Talk Tickers. Ready for another deep dive into the world of earnings calls? Always. Today, we're dissecting Novo Nordisk's Q4 2024 report. And let me tell you, there's a lot to unpack. We're talking blockbuster drugs, supply chain snags, and some really interesting stuff happening in obesity treatment.
Yeah, the thing that really jumps out at me is just how big of a player Novo Nordisk is in these markets. We're not just talking about participating, we're talking about dominating.
Okay, so let's break it down for our listeners. Let's start with those headline numbers.
Well, Novo Nordisk posted a 26% increase in sales for 2024. And get this, operating profit growth matched it at 26%. So they're definitely a company to watch in the pharmaceutical world.
Those are some pretty impressive gains. What's driving all this growth?
Well, a big part of it is their GLP-1 drug portfolio. These are the medications used to treat both type 2 diabetes and obesity. And demand is through the roof. In fact, Novo Nordisk is the global volume leader. Think about this. Almost 2/3 of all patients using GLP-1 medications are getting them from Novo Nordisk. Their reach has practically tripled in just the past 3 years.
Wow, 2/3 of the market. That's a crazy level of dominance. Well, let's get specific. We've all heard about Wegovy, their blockbuster obesity drug. What's the latest there?
Wegovy is definitely living up to its blockbuster status. Global sales are up a mind-blowing 86%. This kind of growth is putting Wegovy on track to become one of the top pharmaceutical blockbusters, maybe even surpassing giants like Humira in revenue.
That is remarkable, especially for a drug that's relatively new. But I think I read something about U.S. prescriptions slowing down. What's going on with that?
Yeah, that's right. It's a little strange. While Wegovy is breaking records globally, there's this weird thing happening in the U.S. Prescriptions actually plateaued towards the end of 2024 and beginning of 2025. And there are a few reasons for that. For one, supply chain problems have made it tough for Novo Nordisk to meet the huge demand. Then you've got formulary changes, which basically means insurance companies are changing their coverage policies, and that might be making it harder for some patients to get Wegovy. And then there's this other issue.
Okay, you've got my attention. What is it?
Well, we're seeing these compounding pharmacies popping up and making unauthorized versions of Wegovy. It's kind of a legal gray area, and Novo Nordisk is trying to deal with it. They're really concerned about patient safety and emphasizing that they don't supply these compounding pharmacies at all. It's important for patients and doctors to know that these unauthorized versions are not the same as the FDA-approved Wegovy.
Yeah, that makes sense. Must be a headache for Novo Nordisk dealing with all that while also trying to manage such explosive growth. So let's switch gears a bit and talk about their other obesity treatment, Cagrisema. The results from their recent trial have been making some noise.
Oh, absolutely. The Cagrisema trial had some pretty amazing results. Participants lost an average of 22.7% of their body weight. To give you some context, that's way higher than the average weight loss you see in trials for other obesity meds.
22.7%. Wow, that's impressive. But there's a bit of a twist, right? Something to do with the dosage.
You got it. This is where it gets really interesting. The trial showed what's called an inverse dose response. To put it simply, some folks on lower doses of Cagrisema actually lost more weight than those on higher doses.
Wait, so taking less of the drug led to more weight loss for some people? That doesn't seem very logical.
I know, right? It really challenges our understanding of how these drugs work. It suggests that maybe people respond differently to these powerful medications, more differently than we thought.
Okay, so what does that mean for Cagrisema going forward and for obesity treatment in general?
Well, it's a big finding, and Novo Nordisk is already planning more trials to figure it all out. But it points to a future where maybe obesity treatment becomes more personalized, with doses adjusted to each person's individual biology. Imagine doctors being able to prescribe not just the right drug, but also the perfect dose based on your specific needs.
Now, that would be game-changing for people struggling with obesity. But before we get ahead of ourselves, what about Amacretin, that other drug in Novo Nordisk's pipeline? What can you tell us about that one?
So the early results for Amacretin are really promising. Depending on the dose, people in the trials lost up to 22% of their body weight. And what's super exciting about Amacretin is it has the potential to be really scalable, meaning it could be accessible to a lot of patients. And there's another thing that could make Amacretin a real game changer.
Okay, I'm all ears.
It might be possible to develop Amacretin into an oral medication. And that would be a huge deal in terms of convenience for patients and making sure they stick with the treatment.
An oral medication for weight loss. That would be a major breakthrough. But with all these promising drugs in development, where does that leave Wegovy, their current star?
Well, Wegovy is still a global powerhouse, and Novo Nordisk is working hard to deal with those supply chain issues and formulary changes we talked about. They've already hit a milestone of over 200,000 weekly prescriptions in the US, and they're expanding globally like crazy.
So it sounds like Novo Nordisk is firing on all cylinders. But what about the rest of their business? Beyond diabetes and obesity, I mean.
Their diabetes care sales are still strong, growing at a solid 20%. That growth is coming from both their GLP-1 drugs and their insulin products. They're actually the global leader in the diabetes market with an impressive 33.7% market share. That's even higher than their own strategic target.
Beating their own goals. Must be pretty happy about that. Definitely sounds like a company on the rise. But are there any potential problems on the horizon?
Well, there are always challenges in the pharmaceutical world. One big one for Novo Nordisk is the Inflation Reduction Act. Semaglutide-containing products, which include Ozempic, Rybelsus, and Wegovy, have been chosen for price negotiations with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services.
Okay, so for our listeners who maybe aren't super familiar with all the ins and outs of drug pricing, what does that actually mean for Novo Nordisk?
It basically means that the prices of these key drugs could be subject to government negotiation, which could affect their profitability. It's still too early to tell how these negotiations will go, but it's something to keep an eye on.
So we've got a bit of a mixed bag here. Record sales, amazing new obesity drugs, but also potential problems like the Inflation Reduction Act and those supply chain issues. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, it is. And that's what makes this deep dive so interesting. We're looking at a company that's at the forefront of innovation, but they're also dealing with a really complex and rapidly changing landscape.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground already. We've seen how Novo Nordisk is basically running the diabetes and obesity markets, explored this idea of personalized dosing with Cagrisema, and even gotten a sneak peek at the future of oral meds for weight loss with Amacretin. We're just scratching the surface. What else is on the menu for today?
Well, next we'll be diving into some of the financial details. Their cash flow from operating activities was a whopping 121 billion Danish kroner in 2024. We'll talk about how they're using all that money and what it means for their growth going forward.
121 billion kroner. That's a lot of kroners. I'm definitely interested to hear how they're putting all that money to work. But before we move on, gotta indulge in a little bit of Wall Street speculation. What's got your investor spidey senses tingling after this earnings call?
You're talking about this is not financial advice, but here's a thought segment.
You know it. That part of the show where we let our imaginations run wild and come up with a trade idea so crazy it just might work. Well, check out for us today.
Well, this earnings call had a lot of interesting bits, but the one that really stuck with me was that whole personalized dosing concept with Cagrisema.
You mean the idea that different people might react differently to the same drug and dose?
Exactly. Imagine if companies started offering genetic testing to predict how each person would respond to these obesity meds.
Hold on, are you talking about a genetic test that could tell you which obesity drug and what dose would be most effective for you personally?
That's the idea. Think about it. Doctors could prescribe with incredible accuracy, really tailoring the treatment to each patient's biology.
Wow, that would be revolutionary. Is that even remotely possible?
It might sound like science fiction, but personalized medicine is already happening in other areas, like cancer treatment. Obesity is a complex issue, and we're seeing these varied responses with the new drugs, so it's not that crazy to think this could be the next big thing.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. So what's the outrageous but plausible trade idea?
If this personalized dosing thing takes off, the companies developing those genetic tests are going to be in a great position to make some serious money.
I get it. It's not about investing in the drug companies themselves, but in the companies that provide the tools for this whole personalized medicine revolution.
Exactly. It's a bet on the infrastructure that will support this new era of obesity treatment, and it's a bet I'd be willing to make.
I love it. A bold and potentially lucrative idea. But just to be clear, everyone, this is all just speculation. Don't go running out to buy stock in every genetic testing company you can find. Remember, this is not financial advice.
Definitely. Always do your own research and talk to a financial advisor before making any investment decisions.
All right, everyone, there you have it. Record sales, game-changing drugs, a glimpse into the future of personalized medicine, and a pretty wild trade idea. But we're just getting started.
Oh yeah, there's still a lot more to explore. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll dig into Novo Nordisk's work in rare diseases, their ventures into new areas of therapy, and take a closer look at their ambitious R&D pipeline.
So stick around, folks. This deep dive is far from over.
Welcome back to Talk Tickers. We're continuing our deep dive into Novo Nordisk's Q4 2024 earnings call. Now let's switch gears a bit and talk about a side of Novo Nordisk you might not know as much about, their rare disease business.
Rare diseases. Huh. That does seem a bit different from their focus on diabetes and obesity. What's the deal there?
It might seem like a side project, but it's actually a pretty important area for Novo Nordisk strategically. Their rare disease sales actually grew by a solid 9% in 2024. And get this, North American operations saw a whopping 20% surge.
20% growth in North America. Sounds like they're really making some headway there. So what specific rare diseases are they targeting?
Their rare disease portfolio focuses on two main areas: rare endocrine disorders and rare blood disorders.
Endocrine and blood disorders. Can you give us some specific examples of the treatments they offer in those areas?
Sure. For rare endocrine disorders, they have treatments for growth hormone deficiency and hypothyroidism. One of their key products is norditropin, a growth hormone therapy that's actually seen an increase in supply recently. That's been a big factor in their strong sales growth for rare endocrine disorders.
So they're helping kids with growth disorders. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What about their work in rare blood disorders?
In rare blood disorders, they mainly focus on hemophilia, which is a condition where the blood doesn't clot properly. They offer a bunch of different treatments for both hemophilia A and B, helping patients manage their bleeding risks and live better lives.
It's amazing how they're using their expertise to address so many different medical needs. Seems like they're really committed to making a difference for patients across all sorts of diseases.
Absolutely. And they're not stopping there. Novo Nordisk is also exploring emerging therapy areas, kind of pushing the boundaries of medical innovation even further.
Emerging therapy areas. Now that's where things get really exciting. What kind of cutting-edge research are they doing?
One area that's getting a lot of attention is their work on Alzheimer's disease. They've got two late-stage clinical trials going on right now called EVOKE and EVOKE plus ARN. And those are evaluating semaglutide as a potential treatment for early Alzheimer's.
Hold on. Semaglutide for Alzheimer's. Isn't that the same drug they use for diabetes and weight loss?
You got it. Turns out semaglutide might have a whole bunch of benefits beyond what it was originally intended for. The EVOKE trials are looking at whether it can slow down cognitive decline and help with memory function in Alzheimer's patients.
Wow, that's incredible. If semaglutide really does work for Alzheimer's, it could be huge for millions of people around the world.
The potential is definitely there. It's early days, but everyone's eagerly waiting to see the results of these trials, and that's not all they have going on in their R&D pipeline.
Okay, tell me more. What other cool projects are they working on?
Well, on top of their ongoing obesity trials, they're also researching treatments for NASH, which is non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. It's a serious liver disease that's becoming more and more common.
Yeah, NASH is a tough one. It's a growing problem, and there aren't a lot of good treatments out there right now. If Novo Nordisk can crack the code on that NASH, that would be a major game changer.
Totally agree. It's a complex disease, but they're making progress. And they're also looking into new treatments for cardiovascular disease and other chronic conditions, building on their expertise in metabolic health.
So they're tackling some of the biggest health challenges we face. It's impressive to see a company so dedicated to pushing the limits of medical science.
And that dedication really shows in their financials. They're investing a ton in research and development, with R&D costs up a whopping 48% in 2024.
A 48% increase. Seriously, that shows they're serious about innovation and committed to developing those next-generation treatments. But they're not the only ones out there, right? There are other big pharmaceutical companies trying to do the same thing.
Oh, absolutely. The pharmaceutical industry is super competitive, but Novo Nordisk has a few key things going for them that set them apart.
What are those advantages? What makes them stand out?
Well, first off, they have a track record of success. They've been developing and bringing innovative treatments to market for a long time. They consistently do well financially, and they have a really solid reputation in the industry.
Yeah, their dominance in the diabetes market definitely says a lot about their ability to get things done. They've been a major player in that space for decades.
Exactly. And they're using that experience and expertise to move into these new therapeutic areas. They're also known for being really patient-focused. They develop treatments that address real-world needs and make improving patients' quality of life a priority.
That patient-centric approach is so important. It's not just about selling pills. It's about really understanding the people who will benefit from these treatments.
Exactly. And that's something that sets Novo Nordisk apart. They're also building a really strong and diverse portfolio, which helps spread out their risk and gives them multiple chances to succeed.
Diversification is key, especially in pharmaceuticals, where drug development can be really risky and unpredictable. It's like that old saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. And Novo Nordisk is definitely following that advice. They're building a portfolio that covers multiple therapeutic areas and targets a wide range of diseases, both common and rare.
So they're in a good position to handle whatever comes their way and come out on top. It's a smart strategy, and it seems to be working for them.
Yeah, their strong financials and ambitious R&D pipeline definitely suggest they're on the right track.
Okay, we've covered so much in this deep dive into Novo Nordisk's Q4 2024 earnings call. I mean, from those crazy sales numbers and blockbuster drugs to their work in rare diseases and even exploring new therapy areas, it's obvious Novo Nordisk is a company that's really going places.
Yeah, no doubt about it. They're a major force in the pharmaceutical world.
So before we wrap up, let's take a minute and summarize the key takeaways for our listeners. What are the big things that really stand out to you?
Well, I think the first thing is just how much Novo Nordisk is growing. Their sales and profits are going through the roof, and it's all driven by that strong demand for their diabetes and obesity treatments. Like we talked about, they're basically the kings of the GLP-1 market right now, and their global reach is just getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, their success with Wegovy has been all over the news, but they're not just a one-hit wonder, They've got this pipeline full of promising new drugs, especially for obesity. Cagrisema with that whole personalized dosing thing, and Amacretin, which could be available to so many people and maybe even come in pill form. Those are just two examples of how dedicated they are to innovation.
Right, and we can't forget about their move into rare diseases and their research into new areas like Alzheimer's and anti. They're not afraid to take some risks and try new things, which shows they're thinking long term.
Seems like they've got a pretty good recipe for success. Strong financials, commitment to R&D, a focus on patients, and a willingness to innovate. But like any company, they've got some challenges ahead too, right?
Yeah, the Inflation Reduction Act and what it could mean for drug prices, that's definitely something to keep in mind. And even though they're dealing with those supply chain problems and formulary changes affecting Wegovy here in the US, it's a reminder that even the most successful companies run into obstacles.
But all things considered, it seems like Novo Nordisk is in a good spot to keep doing well.
I'd say so, yeah. They're a company to watch, both for how they perform financially and for the potential to really make a difference in people's lives all over the world.
This deep dive has given our listeners a great overview of where Novo Nordisk stands right now and what their future might hold.
Hopefully it's made people a little more curious and inspired them to dig a little deeper on their own.
Now, before we say goodbye, I got to bring up that trade idea you mentioned earlier, the one about investing in those genetic testing companies that could be a big part of personalized dosing for obesity meds.
Yeah, that was a fun one to think about.
It really got me thinking about the possibilities. What if we take that idea a step further? Imagine a future where there are AI-powered platforms that analyze not just your genes, but also your medical history, your lifestyle, even your gut microbiome, to create a truly personalized treatment plan for obesity.
That's wild. That takes personalized medicine to a whole new level.
Right. We could be looking at a future where healthcare is really tailored to each individual person, with treatments that not only help them lose weight, but also improve their overall health and well-being.
That's a pretty exciting vision, and it's not as far-fetched as it used to be, especially with all the advances in technology and healthcare.
All right, folks, there you have it. Your deep dive into Novo Nordisk is complete. We've explored their successes, the challenges they face, and their potential to really change the game in healthcare.
Don't forget, though, this is just the beginning.
Do your own research, talk to a financial advisor, all that good stuff, before making any investment decisions.
And until next time, happy investing.